Middle-earth, home to many diverse races, from wizards to hobbits, goblins to dwarves, orcs to elves. Many stories have been created and developed in the world of Tolkien. To delve into the world, you can start here with DagoraC TV.
Melkor was created by Eru Ilúvatar in the Timeless Halls at the beginning of the creation. His brother was Manwë, although Melkor was greater in power and knowledge than any of the Ainur. Impatient with the emptiness of the Great Void outside the Timeless Halls and desiring to create things of his own, Melkor often went forth into the void in search of the flame imperishable. But the flame of Ilúvatar was resided with him, and Melkor never discovered it. He continued to search, however, and as a search often and alone apart from his fellow Ainur. It was during these lonesome periods that Melkor began to have ideas and thoughts of his own that were not in accordance with his fellow Ainur. When the Ainur sang the great music before Eru, Melkor wove some of these alien thoughts into his music, and straightway discord arose around him. Some of those nearby attuned their music to his, until two musical themes were warring before the throne. To correct their discord, Eru introduced a second and a third theme into the music, but Melkor succeeded in holding back the second theme, of which Manwë was the chief instrument. The third was the theme of the elves and men, and while it was not overwhelmed by the discord as the second theme was, it was too fail to correct it. When Eru brought the music to an end, he rebuked Melkor, praising his strength, but reminded him that as an aspect of the creator's thought, anything that Melkor would bring into being ultimately had its source with Eru itself. As such, even the discord rebounded in the end in the glory of Eru's work. This rebuke shamed Melkor, but brought anger in him as well, though he'd hid it. Thus, when the music was made incarnate as Arda, it was already flawed through the discord, and immoderate height and great cold stalked it. Melkor then took the interest of the world and descended to it with the other Valar. When the Valar entered into Arda and began to shape the unwrought matter, Melkor saw the field of Arda and claimed it for his own. However, the other Valar took Manwë to be their lord, for while Manwë was not nearly so powerful as Melkor, he understood the thought of Eru better than any of his peers. Bitter, Melkor set himself against the other Valar. Whenever the Valar worked to better the world, Melkor disrupted their efforts. For a long while, Melkor fought alone against the mighty of all of the other Valar and Mayor of Arda, and long he held the upper hand. During this time, Arda was kept essentially shapeless, as Melkor ruined virtually every early work that the other Valar attempted to create. Fortunately for them, the mighty Valar Tulkas eventually descended to Arda, and his strength tipped the balance in favour of the Valar. Melkor fled before him and left Arda for a time. After Melkor's departure, the Valar managed to quiet the tumults of the world and set about ordering in preparation for the coming of the elves. To give light to the world, they constructed two great lamps in Middle-earth and set their place of dwelling in the midst of them. During this time, Melkor re-entered Arda with the various Maya spirits who attuned themselves to his music, and delved a mighty fortress in the most northern part of the world and named it Utumno. To defend it, he raised the mountains of the east in the northeast of Middle-earth. East of the Sea of the Helcar, decay arose in the north, and the Valar thus knew that Melkor had returned. Before they could search to begin for him, however, Melkor came forth from Utumno with sudden war, and cast down the lamps. The fire within the lamps scorched a great portion of the world, and containing the catastrophe caused by their breaking kept the Valar occupied long enough for Melkor and his forces to retreat back to Utumno. After the destruction of the lamps, the Valar withdrew to the continent of Aman, and there built Valinor. In doing so, they gave Melkor virtually free reign in Middle-earth. As a result, their continent languished in darkness, and Melkor filled its lands with terrible creatures and decay. During this time, Melkor built his second lesser fortress of Angband in the west, as a defence from the west should the Valar attack. Angband was delved into the Iron Mountains, and was given to Sauron to command. While the Valar were unsure whether the children of Ilúvatar would awake, they were reluctant to wage war against Melkor, fearing the clash of powers might result in a massive collateral damage, the likes of which they had never seen since the lamps were destroyed. As such, most of them remained in Aman and forsook Middle-earth. Due to this, Melkor discovered the elves before the other Valar, captured many of them and transformed them by torture and other foul craft into orcs. When it was discovered that by the Valar Arome, where the elves were, the Valar took immediate action against Melkor, instigating the War of the Powers. The Valar overcame the hosts of Melkor and he retreated into Utumno. After a grievous siege, the Valar rent the doors open and Melkor was captured. Melkor was bound with Aegonor and brought back to Valinor. There he pleaded for pardon, but he was cast into Hall of Mandos for 3 ages. However, in their haste to overthrow Melkor, the Valar left many of Utumno's pits and vaults unexplored, and Sauron remained at large. Additionally, they did not capture or destroy the Balrogs, who gathered in the ruins of Angband and went into a long hibernation awaiting Melkor's return. After the passing of the ages, Melkor was brought before Manwë and feigned repentance. Unable to comprehend the evil of Melkor, being himself free of it, Manwë ordered him release. At first, it seemed as though the evil of Melkor had been cured, for all who sought his counsel and aid at the time benefited greatly from it. However, Tulkas and Ulmo were both very slow to forget Melkor's evils and watched him closely. In truth, Melkor was more filled with malice than ever, and began to put his extraordinary cunning to use in the devising way to ruin a man. Seeing all the bliss of the elves and remembering that it was for their sake that he was overthrown, Melkor desired above all things to corrupt them. Of all the 3 primary groups of elves, he found the Noldor to have a perfect balance of usefulness and open ears, and so he worked his malice almost exclusively among them. Over a long period of time he spread lies concerning the intentions of the Valar in bringing the elves to Aman, telling them, among other things, tales of the coming of men, the existence of which the Valar had not revealed to the elves. Due to his carefully crafted lies, many of the Noldor began to believe that the Valar had brought them to Aman so that men might inherit Middle-earth, taking the lands and glory so that they could have it as theirs. Eventually, a shadow fell upon Noldor, and they began to openly rebel against the Valar, taking the lands and the glory that could have been theirs. Eventually, a shadow fell upon the Noldor, and they began to openly rebel against the Valar. Chief amongst the disgruntled Noldor was Fëanor, the firstborn son of the Noldor king Finwë. Though he hated and feared Melkor, his overwhelming pride caused him to be the most vocal Noldor in expressing discontent. For their part, the Valar remained unaware of Melkor's work and saw Fëanor as the source of the Noldor's unrest. Though perturbed, they let the situation continue until Fëanor threatened with his brother Fingolfin with violence, at which point the Valar summoned him to the Ring of Doom in Valinor to explain his unlawful actions. Fëanor's testimony revealed the lies of Melkor, and Tulkas immediately left the Ring of Doom to recapture him, but Melkor could not be found. After a time he went to Formenos and feigned friendship to Fëanor in order to acquire the Silmarils, but Fëanor, seeing Melkor's greed, refused him and shut the doors of Formenos in the face of Arda's mightiest being. Melkor then passed unseen to the south and came upon Ungoliant. Promising to state her unrelenting hunger, she and Melkor came to Valinor, intending to destroy the trees. Then, during a time of a festival, Melkor and Ungoliant suddenly attacked. Melkor thrust a great spear into the trees and Ungoliant drank the sap that poured from the wounds, draining the trees and poisoning them. The trees quickly withered and died, plunging Aman into complete darkness for a time. In the fear and confusion that followed, Melkor sped to Formenos and broke into the fortress. There he slew Finwë, father of Fëanor, and stole the Silmarils along with the other gems that lay there. The Silmarils burned Melkor's hand, causing him immeasurable agony, but he did not release them. He and Ungoliant fled to the north, and the Valar gave chase, but the unlight of Ungoliant bewildered them, and the two escaped. The two thieves crossing the grinding ice of the Helcaraxe, and entered into Middle-earth, completing Melkor's revenge. In Lammoth, Melkor and Ungoliant approached the ruins of Angband, with Melkor hoping to escape and leave his promise to feed Ungoliant unfulfilled. Ungoliant, however, saw through his plan and stopped him before they reached Angband. She demanded that he surrender the treasure of Formenos to stay her hunger as he had promised, and begrudgingly gave her the lesser treasures that he had taken. But he would not give her the Silmarils which lay hidden with his right hand. With his refusal to surrender the Silmarils, Ungoliant attacked Melkor, weaving her dark webbing out of him. His resulting cry of pain and anguish roused the Balrogs from their slumber in the darkest depths of Angband, weaving her dark webbing about him. With the tempest of fire they came to his aid and drove away Ungoliant, but Melkor recalled them, and thus Ungoliant escaped. He then began to rebuild Angband and gather his servants there. When Fëanor found his father slain, he cursed Melkor and named him Morgoth, meaning Dark Enemy, and by that name he was known ever after. The name Melkor was never spoken again by his enemies. As Morgoth finished rebuilding Angband, the slag and debris created by his vast tunnelings was piled into 3 huge volcanoes, collectively known as Thangorodrim. He hastened then to rebuild his forces, breeding innumerable orcs and other fell beasts.